In the spring of 1955, as the first flowers bloomed in Princeton and the world still vibrated with the scientific breakthroughs that had forever transformed our understanding of the universe, Albert Einstein found himself in his final days. A the Tao, man who had unlocked the secrets of time and space, who had revealed the cosmic dance between matter and energy, now prepared for the greatest journey of all, one that no equation could describe, no theory could anticipate. It was at this moment of transition between worlds that Helen Dukas, his loyal secretary and confidant for over 2 decades, made a decision that would remain hidden for 7 long decades. Armed with a rudimentary tape recorder, she captured what would be the genius's final profound reflections, not on relativity or quantum physics, but on the mysteries that awaited beyond the veil of physical existence. The manuscript accompanying these recordings, written in Einstein's own trembling hand, carried clear instructions. The revelations contained within were only to be brought to light when humanity was ready to understand that science and spirit were not adversaries, but complementary facets of one universal truth. Those who knew Einstein intimately knew that behind the analytical mind lived a deeply spiritual man, someone who saw in the mathematical complexity of the cosmos not just physical laws, but the signature of a superior intelligence transcending any conventional religious definition. In his final years, as physical pains intensified and his body began to fail, he experienced a series of phenomena that defied all his scientific training, events that forced him to question whether human consciousness was truly a product of the brain or something much greater, something eternal. The first of these transcendental experiences occurred on a winter night in 1952, when Einstein was working alone in his office at the Institute for Advanced Study. The equations of the unified field theory, his ultimate dream of connecting all the fundamental forces of the universe, danced before his weary eyes, when suddenly he felt a familiar presence in the room. Without looking up from his papers, he immediately knew it was his first wife, Mileva Maric, who had passed away 2 years earlier in Zurich. The sensation wasn't visual in the conventional sense, but a perception that transcended the physical senses, as if every cell of his being recognized a unique and unmistakable energetic frequency. Mileva didn't speak. Communications on this subtle plane occurred through direct impressions on the consciousness, but Einstein instantly understood her message. She came to confirm something he had suspected since his youth, that true love created quantum connections between souls, bonds that persisted far beyond the dissolution of physical bodies. During their earthly lives, the two had shared not only romantic passion, but a profound intellectual communion, working together on the first formulations of special relativity. Now, Mileva revealed that this connection had become a golden thread, woven into the very fabric of space-time, living proof that consciousness, like energy, never dies, it only transforms. This first spiritual visit marked the beginning of an inward journey that Einstein had never imagined possible. Over the next 3 years, he began to notice synchronicitous patterns in his daily life that seemed orchestrated by a higher intelligence. Numbers carrying personal significance repeatedly appeared in seemingly random contexts. The birth date of his daughter Liesel, whose fate remained a mystery, emerged in the most unexpected calculations. The geographic coordinates of significant places from his youth naturally emerged in his equations on space-time curvature. It was as if the universe was trying to send him a coded message, a revelation that reality possessed layers of meaning that traditional science could not yet grasp. The second proof of the continuity of consciousness after death manifested through extraordinarily vivid dreams that began to visit Einstein with increasing frequency. In these dream states, he regularly encountered great minds of the past, Newton, Galileo, Kepler, but the conversations weren't about scientific discoveries. Instead, these giants of thought shared with him visions of a multidimensional reality where individual consciousness was simultaneously unique and part of a universal collective consciousness. Newton, in particular, revealed that his discoveries about the laws of gravitation had arisen not only through empirical observation, but from mystical intuitions received during deep meditative states, moments when his individual mind connected with what he called the universal divine mind. In these dream encounters, Einstein learned that human genius functioned as an antenna, capable of tuning into specific frequencies of knowledge that existed in dimensions parallel to our physical reality. Humanity's great leaps, whether in science, art, or philosophy, were not exclusive products of the individual intellect, but conscious or unconscious collaborations with higher intelligences inhabiting more subtle planes of existence. This revelation caused him to completely reconsider his own discoveries. Had the theory of relativity truly arisen only from his mind, or had he been a channel through which universal truths could flow into the physical world? The third evidence, of life after death, arrived through a phenomenon that Einstein initially tried to explain through quantum physics, but which he gradually recognized as purely spiritual. It began when he noticed that personal belongings of deceased people seemed to retain a kind of energetic memory of their former owners. The violin that had belonged to a deceased musician friend continued to emit subtle melodies that only Einstein could perceive. Old photographs of deceased family members seemed to pulsate with a subtle energy that intensified during moments of deep longing or reflection. Initially, Einstein tried to rationalize these phenomena through theories about quantum fields and the wave nature of matter. Perhaps, he thought, objects really retained quantum information from their past interactions, creating a kind of energetic archaeology that sensitive minds could detect. As the phenomena intensified and became more specific, he was forced to accept a more radical explanation. Human consciousness wasn't produced by the brain, but merely filtered through it. When the physical filter ceased to function at death, consciousness didn't disappear. It simply returned to its natural state, broader and free from the limitations of sensory perception. This understanding crystallized during an experience he described as the most transformative of his life. One autumn afternoon in 1954, while walking through the Institute gardens, he suddenly felt as if he were observing himself from an external, elevated perspective. For a few extraordinary moments, his consciousness seemed to expand beyond the confines of his physical body, allowing him to perceive multiple layers of reality simultaneously. He saw his own physical form walking through the garden, but also perceived the energy currents flowing through all life forms around him: trees, birds, insects, every being connected in a vast web of interconnected consciousness. In this expanded state, he understood that death was an illusion created by the limitation of our three-dimensional perception. Just as a two-dimensional being couldn't fully comprehend the existence of a three-dimensional sphere, humans, bound to physical perception, couldn't glimpse the higher dimensions, where consciousness continued its evolutionary journey after leaving the body. The experience lasted only a few minutes in linear time, but left him with an unshakable certainty. Individual consciousness was immortal, and death was simply a transition to a broader, more luminous state of existence. The fourth piece of evidence came through direct communications with his sister Maya, who had passed away in 1951. These communications didn't occur through mediums or seances. He always maintained a healthy skepticism towards such practices. But through direct impressions on his consciousness during moments of deep mental quietude. Maya appeared not as a visual apparition, but as an unmistakable presence accompanied by shared memories that no one else could know. Intimate childhood conversations, secrets kept between siblings, specific details of family events that had never been documented or shared with others. Through these communications, Maya revealed aspects of the afterlife experience that completely transformed his understanding of the continuity of consciousness. She described a dimension where time functioned completely differently, not linearly as in physical reality, but more akin to what he had theorized about temporal relativity, where past, present, and future coexisted simultaneously. In this dimension, she could revisit any moment of her earthly existence not as a memory, but as a living, present experience. More significantly, she could perceive the future consequences of past actions, understanding how each choice, each word, each gesture of love or kindness created ripples that propagated through the fabric of reality, influencing people and events in ways that the embodied mind could never imagine. Maya also revealed that the experience of death wasn't an end, but an expansion. When consciousness freed itself from the limitations of the physical body, it reunited with a much larger spiritual family, not just biological relatives, but all souls with whom she had shared significant connections across multiple lifetimes. She described joyous reunions with people he had loved and lost, but also with individuals he didn't immediately recognize, but who gradually revealed themselves as companions on journeys in past lives, souls who had chosen to incarnate together to learn specific lessons and evolve collectively. The fifth and deepest evidence of the continuity of consciousness arrived in his final days, when he experienced what could only be described as a preview of his own transition. During a particularly difficult night, when physical pains became almost unbearable, his consciousness again expanded beyond bodily limits, but this time the experience was far more intense and lasting. He saw himself rising above his physical body, observing it from a detached, compassionate perspective, as if contemplating an instrument that had served its purpose well, but was now ready to be set aside. From this expanded perspective, he could perceive his entire life as a unique and coherent pattern, where every experience, triumphs and failures, joys and sufferings, discoveries and disappointments, revealed itself as part of a larger project, a carefully planned curriculum for the development of his soul. He saw how his scientific discoveries had been not only contributions to human knowledge, but steps in his own spiritual evolution, ways through which he had learned to perceive the divine order underlying the apparent chaos of the physical universe. More extraordinary still, he had visions of what awaited him beyond the transition. He saw a realm of pure light and knowledge, where the fundamental laws of the universe didn't need to be discovered through laborious equations, but were perceived directly through expanded consciousness. In this realm, he would reunite not only with loved ones, but with the very ideas and concepts he had spent his life trying to understand. Relativity, energy, time, space would reveal themselves not as mathematical abstractions, but as living aspects of an infinitely creative and loving, universal consciousness. During this transcendental experience, he understood that all his scientific work had, in fact, been a form of prayer, an attempt to commune with the divine mind through the language of mathematics. Each equation he had formulated was a hymn of praise to the elegance and perfection of creation. Each discovery was a moment of mystical ecstasy disguised as intellectual insight. The pursuit of the unified field theory, which had consumed his final years, revealed itself as a metaphor for his own spiritual journey, the attempt to unify not only the fundamental physical forces, but to reconcile science and spirituality, reason and intuition, knowledge and wisdom. When he returned to his physical body that transformative night, he carried with him an understanding that would forever alter his perspective on life and death. He had grasped that human consciousness was far more than an evolutionary accident or a byproduct of neural complexity. It was, in fact, a direct emanation of universal consciousness, a spark of the divine temporarily focused through the prism of individual experience. Death was not the end of this spark, but its return to the source, not extinction but liberation. Not loss but expansion into wider, more luminous dimensions of existence. In the days following this revelation, he found a profound peace that surprised everyone around him. The man who had spent decades tormented by cosmic questions and humanitarian concerns now radiated an almost tangible serenity. He began to speak of his impending death not as a tragedy, but as an adventure, an opportunity to explore territories no telescope could reach, to comprehend mysteries no equation could describe. It was in this state of expanded awareness that he made his final revelations to Helen Dukas, recordings she would keep in absolute secrecy until the right moment for their release. In these final confessions, he no longer spoke as the skeptical scientist who had questioned mystical interpretations of reality, but as a spiritual explorer who had discovered that the boundary between science and spirituality was merely an illusion created by the limitations of human perception. He revealed that he had understood the true nature of time, not merely as a physical dimension relative to speed and gravity, but as a fundamental illusion that kept embodied consciousness trapped in linear experience. In the higher reality, he had glimpsed, all moments existed simultaneously, and consciousness could move freely between them, revisiting the past not as memory, but as present experience, and perceiving the future not as possibility, but as inevitability based on present choices. Deeper still, he had understood that love, not sentimental romance but unconditional universal love, was literally the force that held the universe together. The strong nuclear force that bound atoms, the gravity that organized galaxies, the electromagnetism that enabled life, all were manifestations of a single fundamental force he could only call divine love. This force operated not only at the physical level, but permeated all dimensions of reality, connecting consciousnesses across time and space, ensuring that no soul was ever truly alone or lost. His last recorded words contained a prophecy he believed would come to pass when humanity was ready to take its next evolutionary leap. He foresaw a time when science and spirituality would be completely reconciled, when human beings would understand that their individual minds were cells in a larger cosmic mind, when death would be seen not as an end, but as a graduation, when fear would be replaced by the understanding that consciousness is truly immortal, and that each life is a precious opportunity for growth and service to the greater whole. He passed away in the early morning hours of April 18, 1955, but his last words were whispered in German to a nurse who didn't understand the language, carrying with them into the final transition secrets that perhaps only now humanity is prepared to receive. Helen Dukas kept the recordings hidden for 7 decades, rigorously following the master's instructions, waiting for the moment when the world would be mature enough to understand that his greatest discovery was not relativity or the equivalence of mass and energy, but the scientific confirmation of the immortality of human consciousness. When the time finally came to reveal these hidden treasures, the world discovered that he had anticipated by decades the quantum physics discoveries about the nature of consciousness, research on near-death experiences, studies on afterlife communication. His spiritual revelations did not contradict his scientific work. They completed it, revealing that the universe was even more mysterious, more interconnected, more imbued with purpose than even his scientific imagination had dreamed. The final message emerging from these long-hidden documents is one of triumphant hope and cosmic purpose. Human life is not a cosmic accident doomed to extinction, but a sacred journey of discovery and growth. Each individual consciousness is simultaneously unique and part of a universal symphony, each life an unrepeatable note in the grand composition of existence. Death does not silence this note. It simply liberates it to harmonize with the eternal music of the spheres, where he now dances with the very equations he once struggled to comprehend, in dimensions where mathematics reveals itself as poetry, science as prayer, and knowledge as infinite and unconditional love.